Connor Bedard snaps his 3-game point drought, but the Blackhawks still get bested by the Ducks.
You're Locked On Blackhawks, your daily podcast on the Chicago Blackhawks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on, Blackhawks fans? Welcome back to another episode of Locked On Blackhawks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Real quick, as always, just a reminder to go and hit that like button. Jump in the comment section down below as well to let me know your thoughts on a frustrating 3-2 loss to the Anaheim Ducks last night. Be sure to go and subscribe to Locked On Blackhawks on YouTube if you haven't done so already. Even if you're someone who regularly listens through an audio platform, please make sure to jump on over to YouTube and hit that subscribe button for me. And last but certainly not least, got to let you all know that today's episode is sponsored by FanDuel. If you're not already a member, be sure to go and check out FanDuel.com right now to have a chance to win $150 worth of bonus bets if your first $5 bet cashes with America's #1 sportsbook. All right, good afternoon, everyone. Again, thank you all for joining me on another episode of Locked On Blackhawks, your one-stop shop for all things Chicago Blackhawks. Tough loss for our Blackhawks last night as they returned home following their brief 2-game road trip out west for just their third game of action at the United Center here in the month of November. Got off to a good start. Blackhawks held a 1-0 advantage and a 2-1 lead going into the third period before surrendering a pair of goals late to the Ducks and falling 3-2 for their third consecutive defeat and fifth in the last 6 games since kicking off the month of November with back-to-back victories. Aye, Blackhawks fans. On the bright side, at least we did see Mr. Connor Bedard break out of his 3-game point drought as he picked up a pair of primary assists last night, setting up Jason Dickinson for both of his goals. Dickinson, of course, getting an opportunity on the top line with Connor Bedard for the first time this year, and Bedard getting an opportunity at the wing for the first time this year as well, which, as I mentioned in my preview episode, I think is a worthwhile experiment, given that Bedard has just been so snake-bitten at the center ice position so far this year. Also, moving him to the wing helps take off some of the greater defensive responsibilities that Luke Richardson entrusts upon his center iceman, which kind of allows Connor Bedard to be free and focus on the offensive side of things, which is really where we need him to be leading the charge for this Blackhawks team because they've just been so stymied offensively here as of late. Nice to see those two establish some solid chemistry with one another last night. Bedard with 2 unbelievable feeds to set up Dickinson for both of his goals, which now doubles his season total in output, giving him 4 on the year. I kind of critiqued, I didn't critique Bedard and Dickinson being with one another on the top line. I critiqued Joey Anderson being the right winger to kind of round out that trio. And actually, this trio analytically was the best of the game for the Blackhawks. And Anderson, in fact, led the team with 4 shots on goal and also led them in shot attempts at even strength. Part of me wonders, though, if they would have had like Taylor Hall or Teuvo Teravainen or Lucas Reichel up on that line, someone with a little bit more offensive firepower who would have gotten those opportunities over Joey Anderson. Now, just throwing different players on that line wouldn't have necessarily led to the same type of results, but it still has me wondering if a legitimate offensive threat would have been up there with Dickinson and Bedard. What would have the output for that trio have looked like last night? But good on Joey Anderson for looking the part on the top line, registering 4 shots on goal and getting some opportunities in the dirty areas and winning puck battles in order to get Connor Bedard more touches in the offensive zone. Would really like to see, even though Joey Anderson is my favorite player up there on the top line, just leave that trio alone. Let them work for a game or two. Let's not go back to the blender button immediately, even though last night didn't result in a win for the Blackhawks. Teuvo Teravainen did get a couple of shifts out there with Dickinson and Bedard, leading to him snapping his 5-game pointless skid as well, and the Blackhawks really need more out of number 86. After getting off to a pretty good start to the season, Teuvo now has just 2 points over his last 14 games. Blackhawks offense really needs more out of him and also the veteran forwards that have been brought in to be a focal point of this offense. But unfortunately, outside of the Bedard and Dickinson line, the Blackhawks offense really couldn't muster up all night long, particularly in the latter stages of the game when they had an opportunity in the third period to potentially go and build on that lead. Not only did they not do that, but once Anaheim grabbed a 1-goal advantage, the Blackhawks really didn't have any quality looks to go and tie this game up until the final horn sounded. As far as what went wrong for the Blackhawks, though, last night, I'm going to pick up just where I left off. The lack of a 60-minute effort continues to elude this Blackhawks team, and I think one thing that really stands out to me is just the lack of adjustments made by Blackhawks head coach Luke Richardson in the final 40 minutes, because as I referenced, this was a good start for the Blackhawks. They led 1-0 after the opening 20 and had a 10-7 advantage in shots on goal. But as the Rinkside General pointed out on X, and by the way, to all my viewers and listeners of this, be sure to go and follow the Rinkside General on X and on YouTube as well. He posts a ton of great video examples of some of the stuff that I and many other Blackhawks beat writers and folks that cover the Blackhawks talk about on social media. The Rinkside General does a great job breaking down video examples of what we talk about. So make sure to go and follow the Rinkside General. But one thing he pointed out last night, and also has mentioned several times here through the opening 19 games now of the regular season, is the lack of adjustments made by Coach Luke Richardson whenever the Blackhawks need to have a good third period, whenever they're holding on to a 1-goal lead, or even when they're trailing by 1 goal. It feels like they're never able to have that crucial period and have consistency from one period to the next. And I mean, not only in Blackhawks losses is this a common theme that I talk about in the what went wrong section, but it even feels like that's the case when the Blackhawks win games, right? Like, none of them are pretty. They're not a consistent effort from start to finish. Most of them are a result of relying heavily on the goaltender. Unfortunately, them standing on their heads thus far. It hasn't been pretty for this Blackhawks team, and the lack of adjustments, the lack of offensive output. I mean, last night in the final 2 periods, the Blackhawks registered just 2 high danger chances in all situations. And even for the game total, they only had 5. And as far as the expected goals for at all situations, the Blackhawks only had 1.48 goals. You can't win games in this league like that because you're forcing your goaltender and your defense to essentially be perfect. That's not a recipe to win games in this league. And it's been a common theme for this Blackhawks squad since the opening night. And the fact that they can't make any adjustments, they can't do anything on the fly to go and get better. And it felt like Anaheim figured them out after the first period last night, and Luke Richardson wasn't able to kind of go and rally his troops and come up with a different game plan to have different type of answers. So it's just really frustrating when these same things continue to pop up in my what went wrong section, and that turns fingers and eyes towards Coach Luke Richardson. And there are many, many Blackhawks fans that are already calling for his job here just 19 games into the season. Let me be clear, Blackhawks fans. That isn't going to happen. That's a move you make when your team has legitimate aspirations. And even though we wanted this Blackhawks team to be better this year, and I believe they were going to be better, they still didn't have legitimate aspirations. I anticipated them to finish somewhere between 70 and 75 points. But right now, they're on pace to not even reach 60. So yes, they are absolutely underwhelming, but they still didn't have legitimate enough aspirations, I think, to go and fire head coach Luke Richardson in the middle of the season. I think there's a 99.9% chance that Luke Richardson is going to make it to the end of the year. But what I will say is if this continues, I really don't think the Blackhawks are going to give him his 4th-year team option, which is kind of a rarity in terms of NHL coaching contracts. 3 years guaranteed for Luke Richardson, but this upcoming season will be a team option. And if this Blackhawks team continues to struggle offensively, they can't make any adjustments, they can't show any consistency from start to finish in a single game, let alone put together 2 strong periods in a row, then I think it's going to be really hard for Blackhawks head coach Luke Richardson to return next year as the head honcho behind the bench, because the way the Blackhawks are going about business right now, you just can't win games in the NHL consistently like that. Also, what killed the Blackhawks last night was just not getting enough from their key forwards. As I mentioned in my keys to victory, the Blackhawks needed their veteran forwards to provide more last night. They got a nice performance out of Jason Dickinson. I actually thought the Taylor Hall, Ryan Donato, Ilya Mikheyev line did some good work. That also had me wondering if you had a legitimate offensive player instead of Ilya Mikheyev on that line, would they have been able to put the puck in the back of the net once? But the Kurashev, Foligno, Teravainen trio last night was absolutely dominated by the Ducks' second line. That trio spent most of the time on the ice together in the defensive zone. They lost the shot attempts battle 1-9 at even strength, lost the shots on goal battle 1-4, and were on the ice for 0 scoring chances 4-4 against and 0 high danger chances to 1 against. And it felt like that trio kind of turned into the shutdown defensive trio that Luke Richardson previously had trusted Jason Dickinson and Joey Anderson in. Felt like that's what this line kind of turned into last night. But again, it doesn't really make sense for it to be that trio when you have Philip Kurashev out there, who is not a defensive-minded forward whatsoever. And then also, I think defensively, not only are the Blackhawks missing Seth Jones, but it's also been tough for them without him, as Alec Martinez has really struggled since returning from injury, as he was paired with Nolan Allen last night, and they put up some pretty awful analytics together. Martinez was on the ice for 12 shot attempts 4-25 against at even strength, 5 shots on goal 4-12 against, and then had a 3-13 scoring chance advantage. Did the Ducks with Martinez on the ice, 3-1 high danger chance advantage as well. When the Blackhawks don't have Seth Jones and one of their 2 primary defensemen, Alec Martinez and Alex Vlasic, at this point in time, when one of them struggles that much on the top defensive pairing, it's probably going to be a tough night for the Blackhawks defense. So, Blackhawks fans, real tough spot for this team to be in right now. There are my quick thoughts from an uber disappointing 3-2 defeat to the Anaheim Ducks last night as they blew a 2-1 lead in the third period. Coming up in just a moment here, I'll talk about Petr Mrazek being out due to a personal matter and the latest injury update on Andreas Athanasiou. But first, I got to talk to you all real quick about Prize Picks. Prize Picks is America's #1 daily fantasy sports app with over 5 million active members. And Prize Picks is now the easiest and most exciting way for you to play daily fantasy sports, because all you got to do is simply pick more or less on 2 to 6 player projections and watch the winnings roll in. Do you think Connor Bedard will get more than 0.5 goals next game against the Florida Panthers? Or how about Bedard to get more than 1.5 points? You can now cook up hot takes with your friends and win real money this hockey season when you and your crew run your game with Prize Picks. And one thing I really do like about Prize Picks is it's the only real daily fantasy platform with an injury insurance policy, so that your lineups stay in play even if one of your players were to get injured. So be sure to go and download the Prize Picks app today and use the code LOCKEDONNHL in all caps to get $50 instantly when you play $5. Again, download the Prize Picks app and use the code LOCKEDONNHL in all caps to get $50 instantly when you put $5 down. Prize Picks, run your game. I also need to talk to you all real quick about Game Time. Hockey season has officially taken over, and it feels so good to get back down to the United Center. And I'm sure many of you Blackhawks fans who are listening or watching to this right now feel the same exact way that I did, and that's why I got to talk to you all about Game Time. And Game Time has a new feature called Game Time Picks, which makes getting tickets to your favorite live events, not just hockey games, even easier. And Game Time Picks filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. And I personally have used Game Time since I was back in high school. It's always been the cheapest and easiest way for me to purchase all of my tickets, whether I'm going to see the Blackhawks, the Cubs, or any team in any city. And they also have views from all seats in the venue, which I greatly enjoy because it lets you know what you're looking at before you purchase and before you arrive. I highly recommend you all go and download the Game Time app, and when you do, create an account and use the promo code LOCKEDONNHL in all caps to get $20 off with your first purchase. Again, that's the code LOCKEDONNHL in all caps to get $20 off to go and see Connor Bedard at the United Center this season. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. Game Time. Back here on the Locked On Blackhawks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Real quick, just wanted to say thank you to everyone for making Locked On Blackhawks your very first listen here to start off your day. Now, for your second listen, be sure to go and check out the Locked On Fantasy Hockey podcast so that you can become a fantasy hockey expert and get the edge over your league mates with daily tips from Steal and Flip. And you can easily find the link to Locked On Fantasy Hockey, down in the description of this video, or simply search on YouTube and wherever you may be listening to your podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Segment 2 did briefly want to take a look back at my 3 keys to victory that I laid out in my preview episode, as I do following each and every Blackhawks game here throughout the entirety of the regular season. My first key to victory for the Blackhawks last night was to keep it simple, and I thought the Hawks did a good job of that in the opening 20 minutes. They registered 10 shots on goal, had a 10-7 advantage in that metric, led 1-0, and then just didn't happen the rest of the way. The Blackhawks got away from that simple style of play, and then the Anaheim Ducks started to take over in the second period, tied the game 1-1. Blackhawks went back ahead 2-1 with Dickinson's second goal of the game, but then in the third period, they did absolutely nothing. The Blackhawks had a 29-minute stretch where they only had 6 shots on goal. And from the start of the second period all the way until the final minute, the Blackhawks only had 8 shots on goal. 8. That's not going to win hockey games. That is not a good enough effort in the final 40 to go and button things down enough to go and win a game. And again, for them to only have 2 high danger chances in the final 40 minutes, there was no desperation out of this Blackhawks team. And what was annoying to me is in the final minute 30, they're putting the pucks on cage with everything they can. They're crashing the net hard. They get a couple of shots and a couple of cracks at tying the game up late. I just don't know why they don't have that mentality earlier. Why they don't just try to shoot everything, because the pretty plays, they haven't worked for this team in far, far, far too long. They don't keep it simple enough. Only 20 shots on goal against the Anaheim Ducks, who again played last night. That's simply not good enough. And my second key to victory was to take advantage of the tired Ducks who are traveling from Dallas. Blackhawks let the Ducks somehow have the better legs in the final half of this game, which was completely unacceptable. And then my third key to victory was for the veteran forwards to make an impact. I thought Tyler Bertuzzi had a decent game down on the fourth line with Lucas Reichel. He didn't wind up on the stat sheet, though. I mentioned I thought Taylor Hall had some decent shifts with Ryan Donato and Ilya Mikheyev. They didn't wind up on the stat sheet, though. And then, of course, Philip Kurashev, Nick Foligno, and Teuvo Teravainen got dominated at even strength. When those forwards don't put up any production for this Blackhawks team, again, it's going to be really hard for this Hawks team to win games, because that means they're relying heavily on number 98 and heavily on whoever it is that's in between the pipes that night. And when it rains, it pours, Blackhawks fans, because in between the pipes last night was not Petr Mrazek as expected. Even though Arvid Soderblom has gotten off to a really strong start to the season, Petr Mrazek, unfortunately, was not able to go last night, as he did not join the team during the morning skate, which was the first sign that, something might be wrong here. And then just a couple of hours later, it was announced that Mrazek would be out due to a personal matter. The Blackhawks, though, are hoping to get him back sooner rather than later, hoping he's not going to be gone for too long. But that led to Arvid Soderblom having to get the start in between the pipes. He had a pretty solid outing, but wasn't at his best like we had seen in some of his previous couple of starts. Stopped 21 of the 24 shots that he faced in order to give his team a chance. But now, until Petr Mrazek is able to return, which we can't exactly put a finger on at this point in time, Blackhawks are going to have to rely heavily on Arvid Soderblom. So now They're down their top defenseman who's leading the NHL in time on ice per game. And now they're down their starting goaltender who's in the top 10 in goaltender point shares and has put up unbelievable numbers. And in basically any game the Blackhawks have won, he's had like a .930 or a .940 save percentage. So the hole just keeps getting deeper and deeper and deeper for the Blackhawks. Looks like the expectation is for at least Petr Mrazek to, at the very least, miss tomorrow's game against the Florida Panthers, as Drew Commesso was recalled from the Rockford Ice Hogs, but he's struggled pretty heavily so far during his sophomore campaign with the Rockford Ice Hogs at the AHL level. So don't think the plan is for Commesso to get any action while he's up here in the NHL, meaning it's going to be Arvid Soderblom's net until Petr Mrazek is able to return. Hopefully Soderblom can keep standing on his head like he's been doing in between the pipes for the Hawks. Also, I had to be sure to mention that poor Andreas Athanasiou suffered a wrist injury recently and is now going to miss 4 to 6 weeks for the Rockford Ice Hogs of the AHL, which really stinks. His speed was going to be a huge boost to that forward group and had gotten off to a good start to his first AHL stint since, I believe, 2017 when he was a member of the Detroit Red Wings. Had a 2-goal performance in his AHL debut. Wasn't able to wind up on the stat sheet in either of his 2 most recent games. But man, this has to be a tough blow for Andreas Athanasiou, who I'm sure not only was disappointed to get sent down to the AHL, a stage that he probably thought he was long gone from in his NHL career, but now he's going to miss at least a month, so it seems, due to that wrist injury, which of course is going to make it tougher for him to ever make it back to the NHL level here in Chicago. Also a tough blow for the Ice Hogs. They lose his speed and what would have been a big piece for them inside of their top 6 forward group. Tough blow for Andreas Athanasiou and the Ice Hogs. Hopefully he'll be able to recover soon and be able to join that team on the earlier part of his timeline. 4 to 6 weeks is what he's set to miss. But yeah, troubling times for the Chicago Blackhawks. Fortunately, I got some good news to talk about on today's episode, as after I take the final break of today's show, I still got to get into a beefy Blackhawks prospects update. Real quick, though, I do got to talk to you about the fine folks over at FanDuel. Get ready to tackle the NFL action in the second half of the regular season with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Because right now, new customers can bet $5 and win $150 in bonus bets if that first $5 bet wins. And the FanDuel Sportsbook app now gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place, so that when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you also happen to place your bets. And I know it's been tough sledding for our Chicago Blackhawks recently, but last time they took on the Florida Panthers at the United Center, your boy was in attendance. Connor Bedard scored a goal to help the Blackhawks pick up a big 2 points. Whether you think the Blackhawks are going to get the job done on Thursday against the Panthers, or if you want to fade them and take Florida money line, be sure to go and check out FanDuel.com right now. You'll get started with an opportunity to win $150 worth of bonus bets if your first $5 bet cashes. So be sure to go and check out FanDuel.com right now so that you never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the National Football League. Segment 3, before I wrap things up on today's episode, do still have to get into a beefy prospects update with numerous Blackhawks prospects doing some work for their respected teams in their respected leagues early on here in the season. First and foremost, we got to start with 2023 third round selection, the 67th overall pick in that year's draft, Nick Lardis, who I remember breaking him down when the Blackhawks first drafted him. There were some first round grades out there on Nick Lardis. Some people who thought he deserved to go in the late first round. But because of that lack of size, he wound up falling all the way to number 67 to the Blackhawks. And boy, does that look like quite a steal for general manager Kyle Davidson. Lardis has been on an absolute tear for the Brantford Bulldogs of the OHL so far this year, with 29 points through his opening 19 games, 20 goals and 9 assists after tallying back-to-back hat tricks over the weekend. Hat trick on Friday night for Nick Lardis, hat trick on Saturday night for Nick Lardis. That now puts him second in the OHL with 20 goals on the season. Again, only through 19 games. Going to be a lot of fun to follow Nick Lardis and the Brantford Bulldogs throughout the rest of the year. And hey, we're getting towards the end of November, beginning of December. That means we could see Blackhawks 2024 first-round pick Marek Vanacker rejoin the Brantford Bulldogs and fellow Hawks prospect Nick Lardis here sometime soon. Keeping my fingers crossed on that. I'll be sure to update you on any Marek Vanacker injury updates right here on Locked On Blackhawks. But Nick Lardis has been one of the biggest standouts in not only the OHL, but in all of the CHL so far this year. And I think this bodes well for him to make Team Canada's World Juniors team here at the end of 2024. It would be awesome to see Nick Lardis in action for Team Canada. Next up, we have Aidan Thompson, who has been on a tear like Nick Lardis, but in the NCAA for number 1 Denver, last year's national champions. Of course, Aidan Thompson was part of that team as a sophomore. The 2022 third-round pick for the Blackhawks is currently the second leading scorer in the nation in all of college hockey, with 20 points, 9 goals, and 11 assists through his opening 12 games. He actually moved from center to wing for his junior campaign with the Pioneers. That move seems to be working wonders for Aidan Thompson. And for those of you who have been following or listening to this podcast for a while, then you'll know Blackhawks prospect Aidan Thompson, he had a struggling sophomore campaign last year with Denver. But prior to that, going into his freshman campaign, after seeing him at Blackhawks development camp, I was like, holy cow, this kid has a chance to be a real player. Now, he is a little bit older than a lot of the competition he's facing in college hockey, but still, you'd rather see him put up this type of production than not. So excellent start for Aidan Thompson and the Pioneers as they try to repeat as NCAA national champions. Dominic James, 6th-round pick for the Blackhawks back in 2022. The captain of the University of Minnesota Duluth has also gotten off to a phenomenal start this year with 15 points in his opening 10 games, 7 goals, and 8 assists, which puts him inside the top 10 in points per game in the entire NCAA. Minnesota Duluth has unfortunately fallen out of the top 25, but Dominic James has been doing his part as the team's top-line center. And next we get to my boy, Frank the Tank Nazar, who has been excellent so far for the Rockford IceHogs in the AHL. 15 points through his opening 12 AHL games, 7 goals and 8 assists. Had a pair of goals last night in the IceHogs 5-2 win over the Texas Stars. And not only is the production there for Frank Nazar, but seeing the clips posted by shy prospects on social media. I haven't really been able to tune into many IceHogs games so far this year due to the Blackhawks scheduling. But from what I've seen on social media, some good shots out of Frank Nazar, some good passing, playing with a lot of speed, being productive on the power play, being aggressive on his back checks, and being a reliable defensive center. I'm not going to change my theme on Frank Nazar or my opinion on Frank Nazar. I think he's going to be up in the NHL with the Blackhawks by the end of this month, at the latest first week of November. That's been my prediction for the last couple of weeks here, and he continues to produce at a strong level thus far for Rockford down in the AHL. I also had to be sure to mention that Blackhawks 2024 third-round pick, the 92nd overall selection in this past year's draft, Jack Bushman, who was previously playing for West Kelowna in the BCHL. Well, I actually haven't talked about this on the show yet. There has now been a deal agreed upon where CHL prospects can now play Division I college hockey, which has just been a random barrier at the junior level that seemed kind of unnecessary for the last, handful of years. Never have CHL prospects been allowed to play in the NCAA. Until now, there has been an agreement reached, and as a result of that, Jack Bushman, who of course is going to be joining Boston University next year to continue the strong pipeline of Blackhawks prospects for the Terriers, but he now is able to transfer from the BCHL to go and play for the Kitchener Rangers in the Ontario Hockey League. And we've now seen Jack Bushman play 3 games of OHL action, mostly on Kitchener's second line, and he's gotten off to a phenomenal start. 5 points, 2 goals and 3 assists for Pridham in his opening 3 OHL games. I think this is great for him that he's going to get some better competition to go up against before entering college hockey next year as a freshman, playing for one of the most prestigious programs in all of college hockey. Really excited to see what Jack Pridham is going to do for the Kitchener Rangers. Martin Misiak, want to be sure to let you all know as well, gotten off to a pretty good start for the Erie Otters of the OHL, but is unfortunately out at the moment due to a shoulder injury. Taking a look at 2 first-round picks for the Blackhawks in college hockey for the Minnesota Golden Gophers, Sam Rinzel has gotten off to a monstrous start to the season, 10 points in his opening 12 games, 4 goals and 6 assists. Some of you may remember Rinzel only found the back of the net once in 30 games as a freshman last year. Well, he's already potted 4 goals through his opening 12. Oliver Moore got off to a little bit of a slow start for the second consecutive year in college hockey, but is starting to turn the corner a little bit and now up to 8 points, 2 goals, and 6 assists through his opening 12 games so far this year. Kind of been jumbled up and down the lineup, so there hasn't been a consistent spot for Moore, which I think probably ties into the productivity not being exactly what we would have wanted, but he started off last year real slow as well before almost becoming a point per game guy. I expect the same to happen, but he will get over the point per game margin here in his sophomore campaign. Ryan Green, the captain for Boston University, unfortunately, probably not going to be there when Jack Pridham joins the team next year this is going to be Ryan Green's final season worth of college hockey. Apologies. 9 points in the opening 11 games for Boston University's co-captain, 4 goals and 5 assists as Boston University still ranks inside the top 10 in the college hockey rankings. Sasha Boisvert, the 18th overall selection in this year's draft, has gotten off to a good start to his freshman campaign with 8 points, 3 goals, and 5 assists through his opening 11 games. One thing that has really stood out about Sasha Boisvert, very good on the forecheck, very aggressive, uses his size to his advantage, and also the kid can absolutely rifle the puck. All 3 of his goals so far this year have been absolute beauties, and that's probably the best arsenal or the best weapon in his arsenal is that strong shot of his, translated over nicely to his first campaign of college hockey with the Fighting Sioux. And then last but certainly not least, a couple more prospects from down in Rockford. Colton Dock, who had 2 goals in under a minute last night, is now up to 11 points, 5 goals, and 6 assists through his first 13 games with the Ice Hogs so far this year. I think even though Frank Nazar is certainly he's the number 1 contender to get called up to the NHL, I think Colton Dock is right there as well with his power forward type of mold and a drive to play that style a little bit more seriously this season. I think has been very evident in his game. Landon Slaggert, from what I saw last night, also had one of his best games so far this year for the Ice Hogs. He's now got 8 points, 1 goal, and 7 assists through the opening 13 games. I think Colton Dock is probably a little bit ahead of Landon Slaggert in the pecking order, but another one of those prospects to keep an eye on for sure. Cole Gutman, too, I think is in that mix as he continues to be right around a point per game guy whenever he's down at the AHL level. Now has 10 points, 5 goals, and 5 assists through his opening 13 games. If the Blackhawks don't want to call up one of their more inexperienced prospects like a Colton Dock, like a Frank Nazar or Landon Slaggert, I think Cole Gutman could be a very good option for them and someone we should not cast aside. And then looking at a pair of defensemen, Kevin Korchinski and Artem Levshinov, those are the 2 blue liners that'll get the lion's share of attention down in Rockford. Korchinski, from what I saw, had a real strong game last night as well, quarterbacking the top power play unit, making some nice crisp passes out of the defensive zone. He's now up to 8 points through his opening 13 games, 1 goal and 7 assists. Artem Levshinov has now played 12 AHL games. He's got 5 points, 1 goal, and 4 assists. Both of them have kind of received some heavy criticism for their opening 13 games. I don't know. For Levshinov, I will say, this is a tough start to his pro career, right? His training camp was cut short. He didn't get a lot of ramp-up time before being tossed right into the fire immediately as a 19-year-old in the second to third best professional league in the entire world. That's a tough spot for him to be in. And same for Kevin Korchinski. because of his mold, the way he plays, I think it's good to be patient with Kevin Korchinski down there and kind of look at the bigger body of work for him throughout the entirety of the season, not just, a 13-game stretch where it's just so hard to tell defensemen exactly what type of progress that are being made. I am going to try to tune in more, though, to Ice Hogs games so I can watch those two prospects in particular, Kevin Korchinski and Artem Levshunov, because as I just mentioned, defensemen, the stats, the analytics, they don't always paint the entire picture. I really want to get a good feel for how Kevin Korchinski and Artem Levshunov are handling business down in Rockford. So definitely I'm going to do my best to tune into some more Ice Hogs games. But there is a beefy Chicago Blackhawks prospects update to wrap up today's episode of Locked On Blackhawks. As always, thank you all again for joining me on the show. Be sure to go and follow Locked On Blackhawks for free right now, wherever you may be listening to your podcast, and to go and follow go and subscribe, to Locked On Blackhawks on YouTube. That way you can get the latest episode as soon as it's uploaded to YouTube each and every day. As always, I'm your host, Jack Bushman. You can find me on X at Jack Bushman 2, but be sure to check out my strictly Blackhawks account at Talkin' Hockey, so that way you can get all of the latest Blackhawks news and updates. Until tomorrow's episode, everyone, have a great rest of your Wednesdays. I'll see you next time on the Locked On Blackhawks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.